Today, I want to talk about a very special new show called Long Story Short, an animated series on Netflix that is the latest creative follow-up from Bob Waksberg for the show BoJack Horseman. He's had a few shows since BoJack such as Undone and Tuca and Birdie, but Long Story Short is by far the most beautiful of his projects since BoJack, so let me talk about why. You see, Long Story Short is on the surface a typical animated family sitcom. You have the overbearing mother, Naomi Schwartz, her husband, Elliot Cooper, and their three kids, Avi, Shira, and Yoshi, who they give their combined last name of Schwooper. However, below this very basic premise is an approach to television that I don't think I have ever seen done before, and especially not like this. Normally, any family show you watch is gonna have the week-to-week interactions of the family, but Long Story Short focuses on the entire life of the family. Going back to the childhood of the mother in 1959 and into the lives of her grandchildren even after she passed away in the 2020s. And it's not just that they jump further and further ahead in time as they go on, but the show is not linear at all. Instead, the point of the series is to jump as far back and forth in the timeline as they can while feeling random, going from 2006 to 2014, then backwards in time to 2013, and then jumping ahead again to 2021, all in the first 4 episodes. This is why the series is called Long Story Short, as it's meant to feel like a series of stories that you would tell about your family and your lives, jumping between all these different time frames to give you context the way you would with someone listening to your history instead of watching a linear show. The art style they use is one meant to look like a children's storybook as well, with a unique use of very simple animated models contrasted against beautiful, simple art backgrounds in more emotional episodes. All of this makes it feel like you're getting the simplified version of the story, something designed to be easy to understand because the bigger story is just too complex, but when you put them all together, you get that more complex story. This time-jumping formula has its roots in the creator's previous series, BoJack Horseman, where each season would make heavy use of flashbacks or non-linear narratives at least once a season. And as time went on, the show relied on this structure or lack of structure more and more, but they always maintained these jumps in time as flashbacks to help give depth to the existing linear story. After years of experimenting with that format, however, it makes sense that they would take the idea and apply it to an entire series, using it to explore snapshots of a family's life. The opening title sequence also echoes this by having a scrapbook of the family with some photos flying by, starting with the marriage of Naomi and Elliot, with a series of memories up until a photo of Naomi's own obituary. The show is in many ways anti-spoiler, with there not being a big twist or reveal that the mother Naomi will die, but that already being baked into the premise of the show with this opening. And a large number of the episodes actually take place after the death of Naomi from COVID. Because the story is told out of order, the actual order of the episodes itself has also shifted during production development. And we were originally supposed to learn that Naomi had died because of COVID in episode 2, setting the stage early on that half the show would be about dealing with her death instead of revolving around her life. This entire journey is set up in the very first scene of the series, with Naomi and her family driving to the ceremony to honor her mother after her passing. Here, her eldest son Avi, arguably our real main character, tries to tell his mother that things will be okay despite her grief, as his grandmother can now be with his grandfather in death. Naomi insists, however, that they don't believe in heaven, and thus no place for her mother and father to reunite after death. This is because Naomi was raised in Judaism, which does have varying beliefs on the afterlife, but in the version that Naomi was raised with, the emphasis was on doing her best to appreciate this life instead of working hard for some reward in the next life. This can be seen as a contradiction to other aspects of Judaism depending on the sect, but for Naomi, this system informs the way that she views the world. Naomi is revealed not to be very religious, you see, but rather she uses the rituals of Judaism and really any religion as an excuse to keep her community together. And by community, I really just mean her family here. The show is largely about how her children each grow up and move on to do different things with their lives, and instead of a week-to-week interaction with these characters, what we see are the big events, the Jewish holidays, ceremonies, and even stuff from our larger shared culture like anniversaries and children's dance recitals. When it comes to the start of the episode, Naomi is specifically talking about being in bereavement as part of the 7-day grieving period following the death of a family member in Judaism, one that is meant to be done in silence. This process, known as a Shiva, is used to symbolize the struggle of the family in the show, who all love each other but don't always get along, as is often the case with families. To them, their entire existence is suffering in silence for the sake of ritual, with no reward at the end. Basically, one lifelong bereavement period where everything is done for the sake of ritual in order to be close together without any feeling of closeness. A big question the kids tend to ask themselves is what the point of all this is, something again explored in episode 1. You see, after the Shiva for Naomi's mother, the episode flashes forward to the bar mitzvah of the youngest sibling Yoshi. The bar mitzvah is a ceremony meant to show the transition of a Jewish boy to a man in the eyes of the community and God, but after doing this ceremony, Yoshi's best friend claims that God isn't real. Since Yoshi happens to be smoking some weed at the time, Yoshi goes down a dark train of thought about the meaning of life and why everyone would pretend God exists if he's not real. This leads to Yoshi asking his brother Avi what the point of any of this is, and Avi gives the most honest answer you can give in a family on such a special occasion. It's also that Mom doesn't have a meltdown. And this is the essence of the show. Everyone coming together and doing religious or cultural-based bonding rituals while suffering because what they are going through in life, with no promise of reward, and instead just trying to stop their mother from being more of a torment in their lives. The thing is, Naomi definitely loves her family, but she is meant to play into the archetype of Jewish mothers, and really just overbearing mothers in general. With Naomi, she admits that she's not religious and actually finds more mainstream adherence to Jewish law to be crazy, and she believes she has perfected a system of using Judaism in order to keep her family together. I don't think you have to be Jewish or from a religious family to understand the story at all, but most anyone can relate to having a mom or some other family member who is committed to trying to make every family gathering look like the most perfect thing in the world. And this would inevitably lead to them having meltdowns when other people having their own desires in life conflicted with their vision. For episode 1, this conflict came in the form of Avi bringing his new girlfriend to the bar mitzvah, with his girlfriend Jen not being Jewish. In Judaism, this can be referred to as a goy in Hebrew or Gentile in the later Latin, hence the name Jen as a play on words for Gentile. This is the first instance we see of the characters getting away from their mother's desires for them, with Naomi constantly tearing down Jen and getting upset over every little thing in order to make her feel like an outsider instead of the potential future wife of her son. Each of the children would end up developing their own relationship with Judaism, with Avi essentially just walking away from the faith outside of how it relates to his family, with his wife and even his later daughter not participating either. His younger sister Shira, meanwhile, remains more closely aligned with her mother's ideas of Judaism ultimately, but takes an unconventional approach by marrying another Jewish woman and opting not to be the biological parent of their eventual twins. And finally, Yoshi later converts to Orthodox mainstream Judaism despite the first episode being about him coming to the idea that God doesn't exist. This is a secret which Naomi hilariously exclaims to be a worse secret than what she had originally thought Yoshi was hiding: drug addiction. But in the end, everything that Naomi is upset with is just because it keeps her family away from her. In this very first episode, Avi doesn't just bring his new girlfriend, but he brings someone that essentially separates him from everyone else, that keeps him away from the aspects of Judaism that she doesn't want to be alone through. It's not that he's abandoning his family, but by bringing Jen, he has to be closer with Jen during this entire ceremony that he would normally be bonding with his family, even if he had brought a Jewish girlfriend, as she would be more comfortable participating in the rituals with the family as a whole. With Shira, it was clear that they didn't want to make the mother come off as homophobic in season 1 and make it hard for the family to have close moments because of that, so the focus is more so on how Naomi tears down everything that Shira does, with Shira phrasing it that Naomi doesn't see any of them as the right amount of Jewish, hinting at the deeper issues that either weren't openly discussed in their lives or just not in this season. And finally, we had Yoshi, who ends up embracing the stricter form of Judaism. Because of Yoshi's more strict rules with Orthodox Judaism, Naomi can't enjoy the act of eating a cake she made with him in mind, because this cake, even though it's his favorite type, isn't made in a kosher kitchen. And Naomi is 100% the kind of mom who will try to forcibly make her child eat something against his will. She is that controlling, and it's not even funny when it happens on screen because it honestly just feels too relatable. She's just trying to shove this cake into his mouth, hoping that he will get over it and just play along with whatever she wants. Sadly, what Naomi wants as the mother is to be appeased, and when she ties that to her authority as the mother, she reaches a point where she is happy to have others fake themselves around her, to be fake versions of themselves as long as she enjoys the idea of it, and none of her children are willing to do that. These different relationships are all explored across the series, which covers around 60 years of time, while still leaving a lot of room for more to be explored in season 2. For me, I found the story of Yoshi the most relatable, as my mother tried to raise us with Christianity but wasn't very committed to it. She said she believed in God, but she mostly wanted to have that image of bringing your presentable family to church. We didn't actually start going to church until I was in the 8th grade when I wanted to learn more about God. But within a few months, my mom had decided that if I wanted to keep going to church, I would also have to give up staying up late on Saturday nights. My dad, meanwhile, was really opposed to church and religion in general and tried to convince me anytime I did something bad or not perfectly moral that it meant I was wrong to go to church, like it made me a hypocrite. The point is that it scared me away from both of them in terms of belief, even though, like Naomi, both actually wanted me to invest in what they believed the answer was, even if it was also self-serving in other ways. For me, it just led to me not going to church anymore, but instead defiantly reading my Bible in front of my mom every Sunday morning. She didn't go to church anymore either, because once I stopped, my little brother didn't want to go, and she had no one to go with. So instead, like with Yoshi, she was stuck with someone who inherited the system that she tried to give them, but took it in a different direction, one that takes it more seriously instead of using it as an excuse to be close to her. And I imagine that all of you in the audience probably have some version of this story in your own childhoods. Maybe not involving the same parent or religion, but just the struggle between your parents trying to teach you, but also trying to work through their own issues, inevitably projecting them onto you. Watching this show in just 1 or 2 sittings takes all these memories you had growing up and into your adulthood even, and puts them together in an out of order way that takes you deeper and deeper into the story instead of moving you forward through it. There's a lot of greater, smaller stories here that I definitely don't want to spoil for those who are going to go watch it. But if you don't want spoilers for the finale as well, turn back now because we're about to talk about the final 2 episodes and how it brought all these themes together. The real tragedy of Naomi's death isn't really explored until the final 2 episodes of the season, which both deal with the idea of a sort of look-back ceremony at Naomi's life, with neither of them actually being Naomi's funeral or Shiva. Episode 9 actually takes place before Naomi dies, with Naomi being celebrated for her volunteer work in the community. Here, we get a really interesting look at how Naomi is to other people versus her own family. In both cases, Naomi claims that she just wants to help people, but the stories that everyone else have of Naomi are of a hero who is understanding and soft instead of forceful. Avi has some complex feelings about this, feeling like they didn't really know his mother, but also in a way like he didn't know his real mother, and perhaps like there is something wrong with his family to bring out the version of her that they got. In episode 1, Naomi had complained that the rabbi eulogizing her own mother basically did Mad Libs and filled in the blanks. This wasn't literal Mad Libs, but more so a joke about how this rabbi had used a template without really bothering to get to know Naomi's mother or her family. To mirror this, in episode 9, at this celebration for Naomi where she's soaking in all of her praise, her children do an actual Mad Lib for her, filling in blanks with funny words and an otherwise wholesome seeming speech to celebrate their mother. All in all, Naomi was pretty happy with the evening despite the minor complaints early on and the claim from the siblings that she would manage to make this more of a problem than a celebration, but they were wrong. This wasn't because this was a different version of Naomi they were seeing that night, however, but in the end, she got everything she wanted, even if the last part was just an act. The thing about Avi's Mad Libs is that they use funny words thrown here and there to hide his feelings of actually being angry and hurt, feeling like everyone else got love from his mother when he did not. But Naomi doesn't actually care about the reality of their feelings. What makes her happy is having a night that is ceremonial, entirely about her, and most importantly, where everyone else works together, particularly her 3 children. At the end of the night, Shira is crying and Yoshi is having some crazy subplot with Passover candy, and Avi is breaking down inside, but because they made the Mad Lib together, it didn't really matter what it said. Naomi got the act of her children loving her, and she got to pretend it was nothing else. All season long, she had talked about how important it was for the family to work together, to the point where she will often pull her kids aside and talk to them about the way other siblings are working together, even siblings she doesn't know, like 3 sisters who end up starting a band. And the way she talks about it is how she would be proud if she was their mother, not to put down her own children, but she's trying to emphasize the idea that they could work together in some way, have a family business, or even just spend more time with each other and see each other as a unit instead of some distant, broken family. All season long, she said she wanted her 3 children to stick together, and unfortunately, they didn't quite learn that lesson until after she had passed away. In the final episode for this season of Long Story Short, the story flashes to 2022, to a time where Naomi had passed away, unfortunately during the COVID pandemic. Due to the struggles and the lockdown at the time, Naomi didn't get the traditional 7-day bereavement ceremony that she had provided for her own mother. However, by 2022, the family is all reuniting for the Shiva of their great uncle Barry. It's here, and really by ditching this event, that the Schwooper family finally gets to grieve the loss of Naomi. But this time, it's on their own terms, instead of the forced, ritualized system that demands you do it following the death for precisely 7 days. The whole show is about how the family doesn't seem to like these rituals that their mother forces upon them, and that they don't actually keep them together, and it prevents them from dealing with these emotional moments in their own time, figuring out when they decide to be a man instead of having a ritual decide it for them, or figuring out when they want to show their mother love instead of being forced to because of some ceremony. To make this a symbolic Shiva, however, the show has the episode take place on Friday, leading into Friday night. In Judaism, the passing of the days is counted not by the rising of the sun in the morning, but by the setting of the sun at night, and thus what we call Friday night is the beginning of Saturday in Judaism, the 7th day of the week. 7 is an important number in Judaism, as God was said to create the world in 6 days and then rest on the 7th day, as explained in the very first chapter of the book of Genesis. It's the number 7 that represents a sense of completion, the end of a cycle through which all things are contained before an inevitable next cycle begins. With the 7-day cycle for grieving matching the 7-day cycle of the week, this particular Saturday, or Sabbath, is meant to parallel the grieving of the family over Naomi's death, with this episode representing the end of the silent suffering that is supposed to happen across those 7 days. And of course, it's really just a huge turning moment for their entire lives. The first episode had Naomi saying that Jewish people don't believe in heaven, that they simply believe they are on the earth for the time that they are there. Which isn't necessarily true depending on the belief system or sect or what have you, but a lot of that idea actually comes from those 6 days of creation with a 7th day of rest, as it's said to represent the 6,000 years that the Jewish God will spend creating this world before resting on the 7th, reaching his end, just as Naomi has reached her end for the end of this season. The characters end up leaving Beersheba when the youngest son Yoshi decides he would rather return to his home to have the Sabbath with his community. The reason Yoshi had adopted Orthodox Judaism was primarily because the connection he felt to the others in the community, something he wasn't getting at home with their hollow rituals. So when he decides to leave Beersheba, it's him abandoning the useless aspects of ritual that weren't connecting him with anyone. However, when his car breaks down, Yoshi is stranded with nowhere to go and nothing to do, as Orthodox Judaism requires no use of electricity or anything that could be considered work until Saturday night, which is the end of the Sabbath or the rest period. With that in mind, the family decides to ditch the Shiva and join Yoshi, choosing to connect with him on his level by performing the necessary rituals for him. This entire night becomes more so about Naomi, as you can imagine, with everyone reminiscing about her and remembering the way she used to guide the Sabbath rituals. The characters note that none of them really know the purpose of certain motions and functions in the ritual, and that perhaps Naomi didn't either. The original purpose didn't matter to her because, as we have discussed, it was just a tool to connect with everyone around her. This leads to a beautiful moment where the family is lighting the candles for the night, and Avi sees his mother lighting the candles instead. And suddenly, he sees the beauty in what his mother had intended. She had created a system that keeps people together, and even if they think they're suffering through it, they can still look back at those memories and smile. The very tragic truth of Naomi's story is that despite her selfishness, she did want her family to connect, really even far beyond the ceremonies. Those were a way to force the family together, without which their interactions became increasingly rare, but no one was really able to appreciate the beauty of them until she was gone. One thing brought up throughout the series is the idea that the characters need to work harder to be in each other's lives, to show up for more than just the milestones of the culture, to be there week to week instead of just on the holy days. And in the finale, they reiterate this idea as a family, sadly making the decision after Naomi had passed away to finally be a family without her there to enjoy it. And despite her well wishes in that regard, the episode also really drives home how not perfect her approach was. While thinking about their mother, the characters can't help but have happy memories regardless of the original context, whether it was something truly joyful or them just taking the time to appreciate the sharp side of their mother despite its issues. But that ultimately reminds them of what she also wanted, which was attention on her in a particular way. Back in episode 1, Naomi was grieving the loss of her mother, and she was upset about how the rabbi talking about her at the service didn't really know her, but what she was really doing was what she often does, living in her misery. One thing she harped on in that scene is the idea that she's an orphan now, not grieving the loss of her mother as much as elevating herself to a new role of pity, where others need to do more to take care of her, prompting Avi to try and console her even as the others are arguing and doing their own stuff. And of course, trying to console her isn't enough because what she wants to some degree is to be miserable and for others to be miserable too, unfortunately. It's because of that in the final episode, when Naomi is being celebrated with good memories and laughter, the family is visited by the vision of Naomi chastising people for daring to laugh at her own mother Shiva, wanting everyone to be miserable like she was. Naomi insists that her mother would want everyone to be sad that she is dead, and the characters remember that their mother would also wish for their own sadness. It's not just wanting to be missed, but it's wanting it to hurt others because of how special it is, and that really sums up her relationship with the family as a whole, wanting it to feel special and causing suffering. And this takes us back to the beginning of the story, where the entire theme is that these people have to live a life suffering in silence with no reward at the end, only for them to realize that they could have been enjoying themselves the entire time. Because of this, the characters discuss how, despite not having a proper memorial service for their mother, that they as a family are her memorial service. They are her life actually living on, instead of her just being given one simple ceremony to express the importance of it before moving on with their lives. It really emphasizes how these rituals are meant to help bring us together in order to celebrate these moments and love each other, but how they often can get in the way of that. And because of that, it's their father who says they need to start being in each other's lives for more happy reasons. While the show did explore some of those milestones, even the anniversary of Naomi and Elliot had to be set up to be an intervention for Yoshi, who they had mistakenly believed was on drugs. This was meant to emphasize how even when it's a happy milestone in the show, the family tends to focus on something sad to bring them together even when it's not real. This actually sets up a potentially very different season 2, perhaps building in a similar direction. After the death of his wife, Elliot is also pretty old in age, but they could get a few more small eras in for this family getting older leading up to his death as well, and of course exploring the life of the children afterwards, just as season 1 did with Naomi. Even beyond that, the way the story is designed, it actually seems like it would be rather easy to go in and insert entire arcs and hidden journeys the characters have, in addition to expanding on what we do know about them each year. So with that in mind, I'm glad that they've already announced that there will be a season 2. After the success of BoJack Horseman, I knew I wanted a show that just had that same tragic energy with intense family dynamics, and long story short, really fit the bill. The way the story jumps around the timeline makes it easier to watch instead of harder, I think, as you can trust that wherever you land in the story, you can ultimately understand what you need to. This is so true that the episodes were apparently shuffled into a different order after their production order, which was already out of order, mind you. To such an insane degree that the current episode 6, I believe, was originally just episode 2. Growing up in America, families tend to have blended religious ideas in general, and with that, even non-Jewish viewers are going to resonate heavily with how religion is presented in the show, and really how our culture is reflected through our family and our struggles to be closer together. But what do you guys think? The show is definitely an interesting one, and as a follow-up to BoJack, I imagine people have complex opinions about it, but let me know what those are in the comments down below, and if you haven't seen it, go check out the video I did on BoJack Horseman itself. It's a bit old, and my microphone is even worse than it is now, but it's one of my favorite videos I made, especially from my earlier years on YouTube, and it's still very special to me, just as that show is, and now this one. So hopefully I see you guys there too. See you next time.